And we finally begin to reclaim our waterfront. We've had some difficult moments. There have been traffic problems in various hot spots, and we'll get a chance to talk about those, and those have happened really throughout the region. But the months of planning by the state and by the county and by the city have paid off. Water taxi ridership has tripled since the viaduct closure. We have added a boat, so we have twice as many vessels. We have many more trips, and even with that, there's still plenty of room, so please take advantage of the capacity on the water taxi to bring you directly from West Seattle into the heart of downtown. Elsewhere, Metro has deployed some 20 additional buses every day, and those are mostly covering overcrowding on the C and E rapid ride lines. So far, the buses have provided more than 27,000 additional trips. For the week and a half or so ahead, we expect more of the same. And to keep our region moving, we really need you to continue the good work you've been doing. Start your commute early. We're seeing big increases in ridership on our earlier transit runs, and that helps smooth out the peak, smooth out the rush hour crunch, and makes it possible for everyone to get where they need to be. Work from home if you are able, telecommute, carpool, vanpool, ride your bike, do everything you can to avoid driving alone, please. For a more detailed snapshot of what we've accomplished and of what lies ahead, I want to reintroduce to you Deputy General Manager of Metro Transit, Terry White, and you'll also be meeting our guests from the Seattle Department of Transportation and the Washington State Department of Transportation. Terry.
Thank you. There you go. Thank you, Executive Constantine. Good afternoon. Since State Route 99 closure has begun, customers and the region have had to adapt. We are happy to say that the people have changed their commuting habits. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of new faces on several of our routes, as well as our water taxi. And as the executive has mentioned, while we have survived the first week and a half, the marathon is not over. As you know, a marathon is quite long and can have its ups and downs as you're making your way through. So it's a little too early for us to celebrate and say we have won. We need all of us, our commuters, our new riders, to stay the course. I'm going to give you some statistics here. I may echo some of what the executive has already mentioned. Our standby buses have indeed carried over 27,000 riders, 800 trips of standbys. We've been deploying those on the Rapid Ride C, D, and E line, as well as the Route 120. We've also been filling in for some of our services that used to use the viaduct. Our West Seattle water taxi service has carried 14,810 riders since the viaduct closure. And as mentioned, that's triple what we did last year at that time, 4,260. Now, we continue to have room. We have double the capacity that we've taken so far, so we're encouraging customers in the West Seattle area to utilize those services. There's additional parking available as well. We would be happy to see you out there riding on those services. The Vashon Water Taxi has seen a 17% increase in its ridership, 7,140 as compared to last year. Our travel times vary day to day depending on incidents and backups. And as we mentioned, we still have quite a bit of work ahead of us. I'd like to point out some places that we're grateful for. We're grateful for the bus lines, the bus painted lines, the green lights for buses that are out there, and we are more than happy with the Seattle police enforcement that has helped to keep us moving. We're also grateful for the first responders who have quickly cared for the people in the incidents that have occurred during this time frame. I'm mostly grateful to our transit operators who are focused on operating our service safely and consistently showing up every day during these tough, congested streets and trailways. We appreciate our water taxi captains and crews who safely carry thousands of commuters each day across the water. Now, next door here, if you haven't been here before, is our control center. This is where our chiefs and our coordinators connect with the standby coaches that we are deploying on a regular basis throughout this time frame. If you haven't had a chance, we will let you in, and you can get some nice shots of us doing what we do on a regular and daily basis. So what should riders do for the next week and a half? So I said this last time, continue to pad your schedules. Add 30 to 60 minutes of added travel time. Taking transit is still a better option than driving alone. Now we're halfway through the marathon, and we're really relying on our people to make those travel choices that work for them so that we can reach this finish line together. Thank you for your time. And next I have Heather Marks from the Seattle Department of Transportation.
Thank you so much, Terry, and thank all of you for being here. We are so happy to partner with King County and with the State Department of Transportation. So we've made it through the first half, and things have been going pretty well. Yesterday, we saw a little bit of an increase in traffic volumes, especially in the afternoon. So we are hoping that people will continue to give themselves a lot of extra time, and especially with the rainy weather, give yourself some extra space, because collisions are actually something that creates a lot of congestion. So we want to avoid those as much as possible. It's tough to change your commute, but stick with it, stick with us, and we will get through it together. Thank you so much to everyone who has made the change, whether it's from your single occupant vehicle to transit or from a later transit trip to a much earlier one. Together as a community, we're going to get through this. While it's pretty early to talk about trends, we have seen some increases in some really good choices. For example, we've seen a 124% increase in bicycling on the Spokane Street Bridge, which is an amazing statistic given the weather that we've been having. And our peak commute is a little bit earlier, so it's about an hour earlier. I think that's one of the reasons that folks are catching so many trains, because that earlier time is when the trains are usually operating. We are in this together, and that means that we have to think not just of our own commute, but of everyone else's commute. So do the right thing. Don't violate those transit lanes. Transit's what is keeping everybody moving. Don't block the box. That's not cool. And we just want to thank everyone for hanging tough. Your efforts have gotten us through this far, and your efforts are going to get us through to the end. Thank you very much, and I'd like to introduce Dave Sowers from WashDOT.
Hi there, so good afternoon. We have two major goals at WashDOT, and that is to keep traffic flowing in the region and to get the tunnel open. And so with respect to the first item, I wanted to kind of give you folks an update on where traffic, where we've seen reductions in traffic in terms of total volumes. A lot of the major arterials through the city and on 405 have seen reductions of up to about 5% of total traffic volume. So people are heeding the messages that we've been passing out and either avoiding those discretionary trips or choosing to use different times of day to make those trips. We've seen like the uptick in ferry traffic for King County Metro. We've actually seen a downtick in the number of vehicles trying to use Washington State ferries, which again is a good thing. There's less vehicles on the road, and we're seeing an uptick in the number of walk-ons on the Bainbridge, Bremerton, and the Vashon Fauntleroy ferries. So those are all, again, measures that the message that we've sent out and has been received loud and clear, and that continues to make our commutes and our travel for these 3 weeks a little bit easier. With respect to construction, progress continues to go very well. The weather has been, aside from the last 2 days, the weather's been great. and has allowed our construction crews to maintain their schedule and hit all of their major milestones so that we can get the tunnel open by February 4th. And of course, we're also continuing to plan for the big grand opening celebration the weekend of the 2nd and 3rd. I encourage folks that haven't signed up for that to sign up. We actually have over 80,000 registrations for the bike event, the fun run, and the free afternoon walk through the tunnel. So I encourage folks that haven't signed up, please do so. We're expecting it probably upwards of 100,000 people to attend that event, and it's going to be quite a memorable celebration. It's your last chance to walk on the viaduct, of course, before we begin demolition. So again, to echo what's been said here, we encourage people to hang in there. We got a week and a half to go, and come out and see us on February 2nd. And with that, I think we'll take questions.
Yeah. So again, we have Terry White from King County Metro Transit. We have David Sowers from the State Department of Transportation. We have Heather Marks from the Seattle Department of Transportation. And we would be glad to take any questions you might have.
I have a question for Ms. Marks. Do you guys know, has SPD started citing anyone yet, or has everything just been the keep people moving as was discussed earlier?
They have started citing people, but in general, especially in times of intense congestion, they mostly just want compliance, because pulling people over and giving them a ticket actually creates additional congestion. So mostly they're just moving people along their way.
Is there any stat on how many UPOs are being used at the various intersections, bus lanes, et cetera?
You know there is, but I don't know it off the top of my head. Can I get back to you with that? Okay.
There was talk about signal times and all of that being, to keep traffic moving.
Yeah.
Have you noticed certain choke points that you guys are really focusing on?
Well, you know, when the regional system gets backed up, it backs up onto city streets, and you know the same can be said the opposite way. So when that's happening, no amount of signal timing is gonna. If you can't flush cars out of downtown if there's nowhere for them to go. I will say that we have been implementing some of the flush cars into downtown earlier. So starting 4:30 for the Central Business District and about 5 o'clock in Soto.
I have a question for maybe David Best. There seemed to be an uptick in crashes this morning. Can you just talk a little bit about, Washout did a lot of videos of those crashes. Do you know how many crashes and what kind of impact it had this morning?
Yeah, it certainly had a lot of impact. There was a couple of major ones that created long backups. There was one in Pierce County very early this morning, around 3:30 a.m. that was cleared in a couple hours. We had a major southbound crash just south of Everett, southbound I-5 that, you know, again, we have crashes that go on regardless of whether the viaduct's closed or not. Certainly the weather overnight, the rainy, blustery conditions do make drivers sometimes make poor decisions about their speed and the space between them and the vehicle in front of them. So I don't think that it's necessarily out of normal, the number of incidents we have seen. Because the weather's been so nice the last couple of weeks, we have actually seen a reduction in the number of incidents. So I think the two are tied together pretty closely.
Does it seem like this week it's been worse than last week? I know yesterday you were saying overall it seems comparable, but with today now as well, it seemed like this week the Seattle squeeze is panning out a little worse than last week.
Well, I think it's a lot to do with the weather. So the weather's contributed to that, and the number of incidents certainly affects. Those incidents aren't necessarily tied to the closure of the viaduct. They're just incidents that occur. Yeah, overall, the incident response times have been great by all the agencies. SDOT has an incident response team. WashDOT has an incident response team. Incidents are being cleared. Non-injury type incidents are being cleared within 15 or 20 minutes. And so that's great for those trying to get into town. Kara?
Can you describe what traffic was like this morning based on these accidents in the region?
Well, so I'm going to speak from the WashDOT perspective, and I'll let Heather and others talk about it from city perspective. There were these major incidents that occurred. Those had an impact on travelers that were trying to get in from Pierce County and from Snohomish County. We saw delays on I-5. Talking to Community Transit this morning, for example, their trips in were about 30 minutes behind schedule. So in general, we were seeing times between 30 and 60 minutes longer than a typical commute. Those incidents obviously are going to impact people's ability. And then the weather on top of that really made travel slow to get into town. You had a question here?
Yeah, so can we focus on the tunnel for a second? I know.
Good. I like to focus on the tunnel.
A lot of studies looking at what could possibly happen. When we look at the north end of the tunnel and when traffic is going out of the tunnel, there's 3 different ways that traffic can go, whether it's right onto Dexter, straight to Mercer to get on I-5, or I should say left onto Mercer to get on I-5. There's 3 different sections. Is there a concern that there's going to be a bottleneck there keeping the traffic back up in the tunnel?
Yeah, certainly we don't want to have bottlenecks building up at that interchange and backing into the tunnel. That creates problems for folks inside the tunnel. And we're working closely with SDOT. Particularly, I'll talk about the Republican off-ramp that goes to Dexter. The signal timing there, we think we've got an idea of how much green time to give to the SR 99 northbound off-ramp, but we're going to be working with SDOT throughout those first few weeks to make sure that there's an appropriate amount of green time, and if we have to, modify that so that the lefts and rights at the end of that ramp don't hinder traffic in the tunnel, and at the same time make sure that Dexter still flows smoothly. That's, it's a system, and we all have to work together and be responsible for our various parts of that system, but we all work collectively to make sure that it works.
We talked a little bit about construction progress. We had rain last night. Is that sort of, and I heard that there was a little bit of that. You couldn't pave the dip.
The dip was not paved last night, yeah. The weather, again, has been great overall. There's been a few weather days that we've had to push activities out a little bit. Paving is one activity that's weather influenced. Striping is another one. We were able to start a concrete pour yesterday morning before it really started to rain because it was a light rain. It was just sort of a drizzle, and that didn't affect our ability to put down the load distribution slab at the south embankment of the northbound Dearborn off-ramp. But the weather's changing, right? So we're going to get some dry weather here in the next, starting tomorrow. I think those paving activities are going to begin again. Asphalt, concrete, paving of the finished roadway surfaces. We continue to cure in other areas. So overall, we're going to have what looks like 4, 5, 6 days of good weather, and that'll be helpful from a production standpoint.
Next week, or is that mostly going to be curing?
You're going to see a lot of curing next week. You'll see a lot of things covered with plastic and being, allowed to cure. There's still a fair amount of electrical work. The signals work at each of these ramps has to happen. That's important in order to turn the system on the weekend of the 2nd and 3rd. So, yeah, there's still plenty of work to do next week. Absolutely.
So with traffic, I mean, the message today, right, don't get back in your car alone. Are people making that choice? Does it seem like it is getting worse? People are not making the good choices anymore?
Well, again, I think a lot of the traffic that we saw today was due to the weather. Overall, for the last week and a half, we've had relatively dry weather, and when it has rained, it's been in the middle of the day or overnight, so it hasn't affected those peak commutes. I think people paid attention. We certainly believe that the volumes would suggest that people paid even better attention than in 2016 when we came out with a similar message about closing the viaduct. So, yeah, again, we just want to continue to pound that message home. We're almost there. As the executive said, we're almost there. We've got another week and a half to go. Continue the same patterns that you've shown over the last week and a half. Weather will be better from that standpoint, and we'll be continuing to respond to incidents, and we'll make it through it.
Can I speak
Yeah,
to that again?
yeah, sure.
Just 1 second. So, I will say, first off, that we have avoided the worst end of the spectrum in terms of predictions because people have made good choices. They've made choices that are responsible, and they've made choices that are smart for themselves and their commute to avoid getting in their car alone and diving into the peak of the commute. I will say, as a West Seattleite, as someone who's out on the roads and on the water taxi, that I think starting about Monday, which interestingly was a holiday, I started to see a lot more volumes. The West Seattle Bridge was backed up quite a long way, all the way back to the steel plant on Monday afternoon, in the middle of a holiday. And yesterday was pretty bad. I had to drive because I had some appointments and took the better part of an hour to get from West Seattle to the south end of downtown. And today, this morning, was also backed up pretty badly. So because we're so close to capacity in the system, if you add just a few cars, the whole thing can seize up. So please maintain the diligence that you showed that first week. Use transit, use the water taxi, vary your commute if you're able. We've only got another week and a half, and whether it's for you personally or for all of us together, everything you can do will be a big help for folks. Are there other questions?
One follow-up, please.
Yeah.
Do we have ridership data for Metro overall, not just the supplemental buses and water taxi?
Do you want to talk about?
Overall, we're still putting our data together. We have a team that's working on that, so hopefully we'll have something to release soon on that piece. So we've been given some daily numbers, but we're trying to get a real tabulation before we present that out.
Could you characterize those numbers kind of generally? Like, is there a trend, or to follow up Mr. Constantine's note there? I mean, are people making the choice away from transit after trying for a week and a half? You know?
We are certainly seeing higher volumes on our fleet, as we've represented here today. But to put actual data to that, actual numbers, we're not prepared to say if that's a rise or if that's just our commuters spreading out their commute and traveling smart.
It did before the closure is what you're saying, ridership across the system.
We're still trying to determine that piece.
What do we know that says precise ridership numbers in standby buses, and we don't have even a rough number for the situation in general, and we have nothing from Central?
So we're doing some special things to keep up with our additional trippers. The way we report our ridership on a regular basis is a little more complicated than that piece. So because we knew we had the 20 extras, we could actually try and keep a better tab for those. But combining that with the rest of our service is going to take a little bit more time for us.
Speaking of trouble spots, are there any that are recurring consistently? It sounds like the collisions obviously cause things, but are there certain choke points that have been especially bad?
Anybody want to touch that?
I think the places where you normally see choke points continue to be choke points, and that is generally about volume. We have seen backups on the West Seattle Bridge in the past couple of days that are more significant than we generally see. They've lasted a lot longer. A hypothesis, we don't, it's early to talk about trends and what we know based on the data, but a hypothesis is that collisions and other incidents on I-5 back up the West Seattle Bridge because people are trying to get on I-5, especially headed north. But as Dave mentioned, it's a system. And so all of the agencies are working really closely together to ensure that the collisions are cleared as quickly as they can be. And we're paying extra attention 24/7 to make sure that we're deploying the buses as we need to, that we're adjusting signal timing as we need to, that we're responding to collisions on the regional system. So I'm hesitant to pinpoint fresh new choke points. I think it's what you generally see. Nothing has been a particular surprise. Okay.
We have to have one more than one-on-ones.
Well, if there are no more questions for the group, all these folks will be available to talk to you one-on-one, but also I'm very pleased that we have Daryl, who's one of our very experienced transit operators who can speak from the perspective of the bus driver as to what they're seeing out there. And Neil, who's captain of the Doc Maynard King County Water Taxi, who can tell you a little bit more about what we're seeing on the water taxi routes. I think these two can add some texture to what we bureaucrats are sharing with you. And with that, I really appreciate everyone being here to help us get the message out to the public about how to keep folks moving for the next week and a half. And of course, we're all seeing that, if you'll pardon the pun, light at the end of the tunnel coming up when we'll restore more capacity through downtown Seattle. Thanks for being here.